welcome you all here tonight for our last lecture of our 2021 lecture series for the Friends. And again, if you have not joined membership, I'm the treasurer. I will take your money anytime. So just see me or put it in the mail for it. But without further ado, I'll introduce Diana Davis, who's going to introduce our speaker.
Our speaker tonight is Melissa Buller, and Melissa's had more than 20 years experience in higher education administrative roles. She spent 10 years with the Fundraising School at the Indiana University Lilly Family School of Philanthropy. And as Associate Director, she managed the marketing for the annual fundraising course schedule and worked with nonprofit leaders across the U.S. and around the world to develop customized training programs for staff and volunteers and board members. She is currently a visiting research associate with the research team serving as a project manager right here in New Harmony. Melissa has served on nonprofit boards and various volunteer positions across the sectors. She earned an MA in Human Resources Management from Washington University in St. Louis, BS in Business Administration from the University of Evansville, and the Certificate in Fundraising Management from the Indiana University Lilly Family School of Philanthropy. That's a mouthful. Anyway, Melissa's interests include helping the nonprofit sector improve the world within the unique practices among genders, ethnic backgrounds, and cultures. I introduce Melissa Buller.
Well, thanks, Diana. And good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming out this evening to learn about, hear a little bit more about philanthropy. Philanthropy is not a new term to New Harmony by any means, and we all know that, especially given where we are. And to learn more about the work of the Indiana University Lilly Family School of Philanthropy, how many of you have heard of the Lilly Family School? A few of you. Okay. All right. Great. That's wonderful. The Lilly Family School was founded as the Center on Philanthropy in 1987 around the Fundraising School, an executive education program for fundraisers who work with nonprofits. Over the last 34 years, the center grew to become the first academic school devoted to the study of philanthropy in the world. The school offers a bachelor's, master's, and academic and professional PhD programs in philanthropy. We partner with individuals and organizations all over the world. For example, the Fundraising School courses have been taught in more than 40 countries scattered among 6 continents. We have yet to teach in Antarctica, but we're working on it. We have approximately 50,000 alumni from the Fundraising School. It's an honor to talk about the importance of philanthropy here in the Working Men's Institute, founded by philanthropist William McClure. It's the perfect place for such a discussion to take place, and a place that made a hugely positive impact on my life. Philanthropy has been a critical element in American society since the beginning. Alexis de Tocqueville, a French economist and keen observer of the U.S. in its formative years, observed that for democracy to work, Americans had to actively participate in it as individuals and through organizations. He was encouraged to find that Americans voluntarily took the opportunity to shape their civic life and nurture the common good. Philanthropy's role in American history was seen so important such that the Smithsonian Institute, an organization with ties to New Harmony, launched American Philanthropy, a new Smithsonian initiative in 2015. The Smithsonian seeks to document, preserve, interpret, and exhibit the role of philanthropy in American history, as well as the role of Americans in encouraging and using philanthropy throughout the world as a part of its American Enterprise exhibit in the National Museum of American History. To tackle challenges large and small, it's important to understand the full definition of philanthropy. It's expanding. For years, it was known as the voluntary contribution of time, talent, and treasure. Now we're adding testimony to that. And that has really come to light with the social reckoning that took place in 2020. Its impact and the environmental dynamics that influence philanthropy are also very important. Gender shapes giving behavior. It's important to understand how, in order to further unlock the full potential of philanthropy, to create a more just, equitable, and healthy society. So there you have it. The world needs more philanthropy and more strategic philanthropy. Women can lead this charge. Women are leading this charge. As women's wealth is increasing, women have more access to education, more women are breadwinners, financially independent. 90% of women are the CFO of the household, and women hold up to 40% of global wealth, and that's growing. By 2030, women will be in control of $30 trillion in the U.S. as baby boomers retire and wealth is transferred to women. Many American women experience two inheritances, one from their parents and one from a spouse or partner. Motivations are important to giving. Women consider giving to charity the most satisfying aspect of having wealth. Across all ages, races, and income levels, women are more likely to give. Philanthropy is a sweet spot for women. 75% of couples agree that working together on giving amounts and recipients is a way to connect. However, men and women have different thresholds when it comes to consulting their spouse about how much to give. For women, it's about $311 before they'll ask their spouse for advice or comments. For men, it's $901. They're willing to give a lot more without permission or cooperation from their spouse. For men, giving can be treated like bill paying, transactional. Women take into account values and relationships. Women give differently. Women are more likely to spread out their giving among more than one cause or organization, where men are more likely to write one big check and be finished with it for whatever time frame they're working in. 70% of all giving circles are majority women. Are you all familiar with the term giving circle? No? Okay. Giving circles are like book clubs, only they're giving clubs. Groups of people get together, they agree on a covenant or a set of bylaws or rules, and maybe even agree to giving at a certain level. They pool their money and they get together as it's a social thing as well as a philanthropic thing, and they determine how to distribute the funds that the giving circle collects. These have been growing in recent years. To unlock the full potential of women's philanthropy and overall philanthropy, we must understand how gender shapes behavior because of the wealth transfer that's coming. We have to break down some stereotypes. Fundraisers are used to working with men and addressing men even in couple situation. But as women become in more control of more of the wealth, they're going to be working with more and more with women. The Women's Philanthropy Institute within the IU Lilly School of Philanthropy exists to conduct, curate, and disseminate rigorous research that grows women's philanthropy. When women's philanthropy grows, it inspires others to give. In 2020, the average donor was a 64-year-old woman. We have to diffuse the stereotypes and work to make philanthropy more diverse and inclusive. And the stereotypes begin with the Carnegies, the Rockefellers, white men who made multi-millions of dollars and gave away large sums of money. I mean, Andrew Carnegie set the tone, really, for what is now the Giving Pledge. He said, generally speaking, that a man who dies wealthy has not lived a full life. that money needs to be recycled into the economy, and there are 3 ways to basically do that. One's commerce, taxes, and philanthropy. In addition to unlocking more support from women, we have to acknowledge different forms of giving from all races and ethnic groups. There are some factions of society in the U.S. that are seen as recipients of philanthropy rather than agents of philanthropy, when in fact these ethnic groups and races have been philanthropic in the full sense of the word of philanthropy since the beginning of time. They have rich histories in philanthropy that have been overlooked by history books for more than 2 centuries in the United States. By inspiring more women to give, the ripple effect will be increased giving by all. As you can see from the sample of research report covers included in this slide, there are many aspects to giving: impact investing, differences in motivations among ethnicities and races, giving to girls and women's causes, and how women use technology to give. And big questions: how do we inspire generosity in future generations? Women lead through philanthropy, always have. Names I first associated with the term philanthropy, in addition to the early Owens, include Frances Wright, Mary Emily Fauntleroy, the Donald sisters, Dorothy and Mildred, who lived in the house across the street from the auditorium, Helen Elliott, Mrs. Miller, and of course Mrs. Owen, Jane Blaffer Owen. All prominent role models and mentors that I had growing up in New Harmony, which as I got into graduate school learned was a very unique experience. I was in graduate school before I realized that women were supposed to be subservient to men. Single women are more likely to give than single men, and that includes volunteering. Married couples give at higher rates than single men and single women. How many of you are familiar with Giving Tuesday? Okay. Giving Tuesday? Giving Tuesday was started in 2012 with a simple idea in mind: to make giving more central in daily life. Giving has always been central to life in New Harmony. I would wager that New Harmony has one of the highest per capita volunteer rates in the country. I've kidded my colleagues at the Lilly Family School that they really needed to come down here and do a research project on philanthropy. Not only the volunteer rates, but also the dollars that the community contributes. When you look at, especially when you consider mutual aid efforts that take place, when someone's house burns down or they fall on bad luck, it doesn't take much for the community to spin on a dime, throw a fundraiser, a pork chop dinner at a church or at the American Legion to raise money to help those in need. The campaigns I've seen around for the deputy who was injured, who was shot, and the blue lights is a classic example of mutual aid. Giving Tuesday is now a global phenomenon that takes place the Tuesday after Thanksgiving in response to Black Friday, Small Business Saturday, and Cyber Monday. Women value a sense of community, including when it comes to giving. As was mentioned, women want to build relationships with organizational constituents by volunteering and through board service. In the past 10 years, the number of giving circles, which we talked about a little bit earlier, has tripled, and 70% are majority women. Giving circles contributed $1.3 billion over the last 35 years. And some of these giving circles are in communities like New Harmony. Some of them are in large metropolitan areas like New York, Chicago, and Miami. So they run the gamut. I think I saw a figure today. There are roughly 500, a little more than 500 giving circles across the United States, across all 50 states. So you think about that and the magnitude of that. And $1.3 billion. That's a lot of impact. Social media is not new to women philanthropists. The suffragists contributed time, talent, treasure, and testimony toward the passing of legislation that granted Caucasian women the right to vote. It's estimated that the suffragists wrote millions of letters over the course of 70 years it took to get the 19th Amendment to be ratified in 1920. They wrote letters to promote the women's right to vote and to raise money. And this was without a computer. This is without modern day conveniences that we have now. No Facebook, no Twitter. Photos show the suffragists sitting at tables and desks surrounded by papers. They wrote letters to each other to build community. Again, a value that women instill in their giving practices, a sense of community with each other and with the organizations that they're supporting. They even started their own newspapers. Today, women use technology to make gifts. Women give nearly 2/3 of the gifts that are made online, and they are more likely to give to smaller organizations. Women are socialized to be nurturing, helping, and compassionate from a very young age and to make personal connections. Men are socialized to develop these virtues as well, but it's a matter of degree and priority. Women are less motivated by tax incentives and recognition and see wealth as a means to an end, expression of values, and a way to make the world a better place. Women support causes they connect with personally. Giving inspires giving. We touched on this a little bit earlier. When men see women and other men giving to women and girls' causes, they are more likely to donate. 47,000 organizations in the U.S. are dedicated to women and girls. They received 1.9%, that's a new figure, of all charitable contributions in 2018. There are 1.8 million nonprofit organizations in the U.S. total. It's about, overall, this is a side note to what I'm talking about right now, but people don't realize this, but the nonprofit sector comprises about 6% of the GDP in the U.S. It is a major player in terms of job creation and recycling money back into the economy. So 47,000 organizations are dedicated to women and girls. They received 1.9% of all charitable contributions in 2018. There's room to grow as we become more conscientious of why we give, how we give, and to what. Giving makes us all happier. We have a faculty member at the Lilly Family School who actually does research on this. Giving changes the brain chemistry. It's a feel-good opportunity for all of us. Remember earlier in the presentation when it was pointed out that single women and couples are more likely to give than single men. So, if you have single men in your life, encourage them to give. It'll grow philanthropy and they will experience greater life satisfaction as a result. Hank Rosso, founder of the Fundraising School, which started out as a pedestal on which the Lilly Family School of Philanthropy was built and is now a pillar, is frequently quoted as having said, "Fundraising is the gentle art of teaching the joy of giving." That's one of my all-time favorite quotes. I mention this for a couple of reasons. One, if you received a request to give or volunteer via email, the mail, or a person, remember to think of giving as one of life's feel-good opportunities. The other reason is, if you serve on a board or committee, remember this if you are asked to make requests from family or friends to give to organizations that are near and dear to your heart. Fundraising has come a long way in terms of its reputation. It started out in the early days as begging. It was not held in very high regard. But Hank Rosso really was the motivator behind making it to be perceived as a noble profession. the noble profession that it has become today. The Lilly Family School research team works with the Giving USA Trust to publish an annual report on giving in the U.S. The report is generated from IRS data and additional research. In any given year, approximately 70% of all giving comes from individuals. Does that surprise anybody? If you would have had, before I said that, if you had guessed where most giving comes from, what would you have said on an annual basis? Corporations and large foundations. But in all actuality, 70% of all giving in the U.S. comes from individuals like us sitting in this room. The general perception is that the majority of giving comes from large private and corporate foundations because the gifts are usually large and receive lots of media attention. When bequests and family foundations are factored in, closer to 86% of all giving comes from individuals. Philanthropy continues to grow each year. Knowledge about giving is growing, and people continue to learn about ways to give. In addition, knowledge about the importance of giving to organizations that support women and girls continues to grow as well. Total giving in 2020 was about $471 billion. Women control roughly $14 trillion in assets in North America alone. If you are not already familiar with her, I'd like to introduce you to Madam C.J. Walker. How many of you who have heard of Madam C.J. Walker? Ah, excellent. Hooray! One of our faculty members, Tyrone McKinley Freeman, spent years researching her life and has written a book about her from the philanthropic perspective. There's been a lot written about her business. She was the first self-made millionaire female in the U.S. She grew from the daughter of slaves and became was an orphan at age 7, and a mother by the age of 17, and a widow before she was age 20. She moved from Vicksburg, Mississippi to St. Louis in her early 20s and became a washerwoman, where she made $1.50 a day, washing, as you would guess, white people's clothing. She developed her own cosmetic line and hair care product line, and went on to become a very successful entrepreneur. And she accomplished all of this in the time of Jim Crow. She embodied each of the points on this slide. And this is, again, expanding the definition of philanthropy, looking at it from a more holistic term rather than just making large monetary contributions. She learned at a young age, through example and experience of being a recipient, she started out as a recipient, that we all have the power to be philanthropists within the context of our means, time, talent, treasure, and testimony. Her adoption of faith, racial uplift, education, and self-help informed her business and philanthropic practices throughout her life. Realizing she was a beneficiary of philanthropy of many types, she developed a giving plan and continued to expand it as she became a successful entrepreneur. As I mentioned, she advanced from being orphaned at age 7 to building a national company. She grew her company by hiring African American women, again, impact investing, who wanted to achieve self-sustainability and independence, forming Walker Clubs in cities with multiple employees. She encouraged the women to be philanthropic individually and through her clubs and other organizations in their communities. She invested in communities by hiring women to sell her products. She served as a role model to her daughter and her employees. The Walker Clubs functioned in a similar way to today's giving circles. The women supported schools, orphanages, as well as individuals in need. She placed the manufacturing facility in Indianapolis. home today to the Walker Theater, located at the corner of Indiana Avenue and West Streets across from the IUPUI campus. If you would like to know more about her phenomenal story, I am donating a copy of Madam C.J. Walker's Gospel of Giving, Black Women's Philanthropy During Jim Crow, to the Working Men's Institute. You can also visit an exhibit housed in the Indiana History Center in Indianapolis at the corner of Ohio and West Streets. As noted on the website, William McClure established the Working Men's Institute to disseminate useful knowledge to those who work with their hands. So how does working with our hands relate to philanthropy? Any ideas?
We make things to give to organizations.
Yeah, we make things to give to organizations. We build homes with our hands. We make meals with our hands. We make lap blankets for hospitals and nursing homes with our hands. We stock food pantries with our hands. We plant trees with our hands. And the beat goes on. How many of you use the term philanthropist to describe yourself if someone asks, "What do you do?" Any of you? How many of you have volunteered for some point at Kunstfest in some capacity? Okay. How many of you have volunteered for a charitable cause? How many of you have made a financial contribution to a nonprofit? How many of you have attended or contributed to a fund to help a friend or a neighbor? Let's say it together. I am a philanthropist. One more time. I am a philanthropist. One more time. I am a philanthropist. We at the Lilly Family School and Indiana University, the Lilly Family School is located on the IUPUI campus, have been working diligently for 34 years to make philanthropy a mainstream term. It's more mainstream now than it ever has been, I would say. And I actually ran into a 20-something the other day who, I don't know, we were chatting and she asked me what I did and I told her and she goes, "I know that word philanthropy." She went to school in Indianapolis. She goes, "I see it all over campus when they're building new buildings. And so when IUPUI builds a new building, they put banners on the fences around the construction site that says, 'Your philanthropy at work.'" So we're winning, we're winning. So I will leave you with the following questions to ponder as you continue to travel down your own philanthropic journey. You might find them helpful to creating your philanthropic autobiography. What is your first recollection of having benefited from philanthropy? Well, was it a church, a library, a museum, swimming lessons or CPR training by the Red Cross? How do you approach charitable decision making? How do you decide where to volunteer, to give your time, your treasure, your testimony? Do you have a plan in place for that? Do you have a list in place for any of that? What values are most important to you? What values are most important to you? Human services, the environment, animal rescue, social justice, poverty elimination, education, ending hunger, promoting the arts. Do your current contributions of time, talent, treasure, and testimony align with the values that are most important to you? How can financial advisors help people be more intentional about their giving? How can fundraisers tailor their approaches to work with different families about giving? How would you like to be approached about giving to an organization? What role can you play in starting the conversation with a fundraiser in a tone and approach that is comfortable to you? If you have your giving plan in place, you've lined out your values, and you're not being approached by the organizations that you would like to be approached by or that you're interested in, what can you do to initiate the conversation in a way that works for you? Any other ideas about things you can do to write your philanthropic autobiography? And I suggest, if philanthropy is important to you, that you do sit down and journal a little bit about your giving and how you volunteer and spend your time. And your testimony. Testimony is just as important as the time and the treasure and the talent. How many of you have told your neighbors about a church luncheon or fundraiser or something? That's testimony. That, or about something going on here, for example. All that's testimony.
You don't have to go worldwide or global. Right here in your neighborhood. I give all the time. Repairing, doing errands. I'm giving as much as I can, and right here in New Harmony,
Mm-hmm.
and getting rewarded every day with a bowl of soup on my back porch.
All right.
So that's my way of giving here in New Harmony. So,
And that's important.
yeah.
That
And
gets,
it builds up. I'm not going to stay local here. I'll be nationally known someday.
you have big bowls of soup on your back porch. Do any of you have any questions about anything I've talked about so far? Or thoughts, just reactions?
This gentleman that founded this organization, was he a professor?
That founded the fundraising
Yeah.
school?
Was it Hank's? What's his name?
Hank Rosso?
Yeah.
No, he was a fundraiser, and the fundraising school started at he and his wife Dottie's kitchen table in San Rafael, California, a suburb of San Francisco, in 1974. And his vision was for the fundraising school to become surrounded by an academic program and research at some point in time. So when he retired, got ready to retire in the 80s, a couple of people from the Indiana University Foundation attended one of his courses. And he started out with one course, Principles and Techniques of Fundraising. And within 3 years, it went international. He was teaching in the San Francisco area, and word spread so quickly in the early 70s that he was teaching in New Zealand and Ireland within three to 5 years after he founded the school. And they ran the school from their kitchen table until it moved to Indiana University in 1987. So for 13 years.
Did they move here?
They moved the school to Indianapolis.
They
No, they retired.
stayed in California.
They stayed in California. They retired. So what started at one couple's kitchen table is now an internationally renowned academic research center housed at IUPUI in Indianapolis, and has students from all over the world, fellows that work with the Ford Foundation. Have a group of fellows coming every other year from Africa. We have students from China. One of my colleagues lives in Budapest. She really works remotely. It's an amazing story in itself, how it started with one couple and their friends at a kitchen table.
What are you doing now in your research here in New Harmony?
What am I working on now?
Yeah.
Right now, I'm working on 3 projects, and one is called the Everyday Donors of Color, And we're looking at differences in racial backgrounds and motivations for giving. So, and that's where this expanded definition of giving comes into play, because African Americans have been practicing mutual aid forever, even before they came to the U.S. in the slave days. And when they got to the U.S., that's what kept them going. They looked out for each other, they helped each other. If someone got sick, they pooled their resources, whatever they had, to help each other out. And they founded the African Methodist Episcopal Church, and that became a big player in helping develop leaders in the African American community. They wanted to prove that African Americans could serve in leadership roles, and so all of the bishops and officers within the church went through leadership training, and that's how leadership roles developed for African Americans in the 1800s, was through that church. But Asian Americans are also very philanthropic, and the research, we had phase 1 of the report came out in April, and the research showed that Asian Americans and African Americans are more likely to give directly to an individual who's in need of help than Caucasians are. And also to give to strangers. They're more willing to give to a stranger in need as well. And this came out through a crowdfunding study. Are you familiar with crowdfunding, online giving? Okay, yeah. So that's one project I'm working on. Another project I'm working on right now is we're working with the Lilly Foundation to take a look at board composition, engagement, and leadership in Central Indiana, so that we can work to help Central Indiana organizations become more diverse and inclusive and equitable in their practices. And then a spin-off of the Everyday Donors of Color project is Understanding Latinx Philanthropy. And it's interesting because Latinx is a term that's used universally to describe all Latin-oriented ethnics. We have Mexico, we have South America, we have Central America, and all of which have their own cultures. And so now we're beginning to take a look at the differences among each of those cultures. And we've also learned something too, it's come to light with Native Americans. They've always been clumped in other, and we're changing our language in reports because it would say something, an asterisk would say the sample size is not significant enough to have its own category. So, in short, much more eloquently than that, but that's the gist of it. And so now we're going to refrain from using the term not significant. These populations are significant, but where the numbers in our samples are not strong enough to make broad generalizations confidently based on the results of the research. So again, it's expanding that notion of philanthropy, who's the philanthropist, who's the recipient, and making sure everyone gets credit within the context of their own cultures. Because even within Native Americans, there are multiple nations and multiple languages. And even to clump Native Americans all together is really a misrepresentation. So we're trying to sort that out. So those are 3 projects I'm working on now. But we also have the Women's Philanthropy Institute just launched the Women's Giving Index a couple of weeks ago that looks at all of women's giving and comes up like a consumer price index, only it's for women's giving. We have a project going on looking at declining donors, looking at donors who are giving less and trying to figure out why are they giving less, what's prompted them to give less, and is it because they've redirected their giving? Is it because they've had a change in the economy of their household. That's a sticky one to work on because declining donors obviously are losing interest in giving, so they're not always running up and throwing up their hand to be interviewed and fill out surveys. But it's underway. And then we're always doing Giving USA. That's an annual report. And we have the Philanthropy Panel Study, which is a longitudinal study that's been going on since the 60s. It's a part of a larger study that's run by the Michigan State University. It's been going on since 1968. So, and then we have the Bank of America High Net Worth Study that looks at the giving motivations for high net worth individuals across the country. So we have a big stack of, long list of projects that we're always working on. We have the Muslim Philanthropy Initiative that's just a few years old, but looking at Muslim giving in the U.S. and the motivations behind that, and it's related to their faith. We have the Lake Institute on Faith and Giving that looks at giving to congregations and faith-based organizations. So it's a big program. And if you'd like to learn more about it, if you want to add inspiration and joy and upbeat positive news, follow the Indiana University Lilly Family School of Philanthropy on your social media. On Facebook, we have Facebook feed, Twitter feed, Instagram feed. Lake Institute has their own feed. Women's Philanthropy Institute has their own feed. And we talk about what's going on in the sector, but we also talk about the work of our students. And they're always doing great things, embarking on adventures, philanthropic adventures, or a research project, or founding a new organization. So if you want to add some upbeat, inspirational feed to your social media, follow any of those or all of them. Anything else?
Well, I want to thank everyone for coming tonight again, and we do have some refreshments in the back, and I'd like to present this to you. Thank you again
Oh, you're
for
welcome.
coming.
Thank you.
We really appreciate it.
Thanks for coming. And here's the book.